Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ag Weather Outlook, sponsored by NCGA and FMC. I'm John Felt. Well, sometimes when we get towards the middle of the growing season, in the middle of summer, things are about what you expect. Daytime thunderstorms that pop up, give us some needed rain. Some areas get that and some don't. This sure hasn't been one of those summers. Matter of fact, there have been very, very few days that have that typical afternoon convection. We've really been much more active with scattered or active patterns of precipitation. And matter of fact, that's one of the things I want to talk about is the difference between these pop-up storms that we typically get that don't cover a lot of area and these what I would call synoptically based or bigger base type weather systems that we've been getting over the eastern Corn Belt this summer so far that cover a lot of area. And that's another reason why we've been so wet. The systems have been moving and covering a lot of area. I'm going to talk about that later this week, perhaps in one of my posts. But here's the number of rain days as of July 9th. So actually, since then, it's been reduced a bit because it's been wet in the last day over the eastern Corn Belt. But nonetheless, I think it tells a story that we've still had quite a few rain days over the eastern Corn Belt, somewhat dry over the west, but not quite as much as we've seen in the past. And that's sort of the tone of this briefing. But having said that, it's still not good over the eastern Corn Belt, and I'll be talking about that a bit. But one of the things that I wanted to do, I wanted to find a graphic, and I'm going to still look for this, that shows the reduction in solar energy or sunshine, because I really suspect with all this precipitation, we have a lot more clouds than usual. And this is one of the ways we can look at it. Look at the maximum consecutive dry days in the last 30 days. We're looking at that area in blue is only 3. Area in green is 6 to 8. So we are really have been cloudy over a large part of the Corn Belt and usually cloudy this season so far. And that's not good either for a number of reasons. Obviously, we need sun for vigorous corn growth, but also it doesn't help evaporate the moisture out of the upper soils as quick as would be expected. So here's your precipitation over the last 7 days. I've been using this term a lot, if you remember in spring, ample precipitation. And almost every week we do see some precipitation. Now, over the western Corn Belt, parts of the Dakotas and Kansas, Minnesota, Iowa, that was sort of welcome. We needed some rain in those areas. It was getting dry. This week's going to be very hot, so another reason, let's keep those upper soils somewhat in the normal range, because when we get very hot, that becomes very important. But then as we get to the east, Illinois, Indiana in particular, Missouri as well, those are really the states that have had excess rainfall. And we did have some bands of rain where we really didn't want it. This is overlapping an area that's already been very wet. At least try to find some positive aspect of this. In the past, this area of yellow would have covered the entire state. So at least now we're seeing some streaks here. And then we're inside of there. If you're in this region right here, it was much drier. So that's not really all that good of news, but at least I'm trying to find some positive aspect. So here's your precipitation over the last 7 days. The percent of normal. Blue is above normal. Really, I'd love to see some yellow and red over the eastern Corn Belt. Haven't seen it for a really long time, which would be below normal. And then if we look at the past 7 days departure from normal, once again we see well above normal, 2 to 3 inches in this area blue. I guess the good news again is if we look at this area gray here, we are seeing over the last week, we are seeing some significant areas that the excess was not all that much. And that's when you might have noticed I've been saying the prospects of extreme rain like we had earlier this summer, I don't think those prospects are increasing. Those are decreasing, and that's what we see this week. Still ample to excess rain over the eastern Corn Belt, but not like we've seen in the past. Okay, so here are your temperature departures for the last week. Cooler than normal. We're really going to reverse that this week in some areas, especially the west. I still really don't see any signs of excess heat over the eastern Corn Belt. I think it's going to warm up, but I don't see the excess heat. I do see it over the west. And if we go past the last 30 days, look at this. This is the story for the last 30 days. Minnesota, Iowa, the Great Lakes states, Eastern Corn Belt, below normal temperatures for the last 30 days. This is green, especially the little dots of blue. So Iowa has been unusually cool the last 30 days. Soil moisture, as you might suspect. Now, there's always going to be localized impacts. So when I describe soil moisture precipitation, it might not be exactly what you're having in your farm, but overall, the Western Corn Belt, Central Corn Belt is doing okay as far as soil moisture. And then the Eastern Corn Belt right here, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and to a lesser degree, Ohio. This is the area. Eastern Missouri, Northeast Missouri, much of Illinois, much of Indiana. Those are the areas that soil moisture is the highest. Okay, so let's look ahead at what the forecast. This is what my weekly briefing tries to really give you a heads up on what's expected. Now this week, look at this ridge of high pressure. Now this is more typical summertime. We have a bulging ridge of high pressure over the middle part of the nation. Jet stream will be pushing up to the north. And when you see this push of high pressure in summertime is going to bring surface high pressure, is going to bring much warmer or hotter temperatures than normal. So if we look at on Sunday, we're looking at temperatures nearing 100 degrees over a large part of the Western Corn Belt, at least the mid to upper 90s, I should say, Dakotas, Nebraska. Then we get into the 100s over Kansas, centered over Kansas, right under that ridge of high pressure. And then temperatures moderate as we go east. Illinois and Indiana generally still remaining in the 80s. That's due to a couple reasons. Clouds for one, but the other thing is the ridge of high pressure is centered off to the west. But I tell you, I'd still like to see hotter temperatures in this region to pull some of that moisture out of the ground. Then as we look ahead later in July, and to tell you the truth, the models have been not necessarily the best in these long-range predictions as we get into the summer months. But look at this here. If you look really closely, your ridge of high pressure is still out in the central part of the U.S. right here. But look at this. There's some signs of a dip in here. You can't really see it all that strong, but just very subtle. Sometimes in summertime, very subtle pattern changes have a significant impact. I'm going to show you what that means. If we look at temperatures here, July 21st, and that's way out there, we see temperatures cooler than normal that are dipping into this region here. This is what we'd call a backdoor cold front, most likely at some point in time in the middle of the month. So what point I'm trying to make is the Eastern Corn Belt, maybe the Great, and definitely the Great Lakes, parts of the Central Corn Belt are vulnerable, in my opinion, to some repeated pushes of cooler air, midsummer cooler air. Now the far west still looks fairly hot, but I think majority of the Corn Belt is going to go through this heat, but then it's going to most likely cool off a bit as we get into the middle of the month, maybe even the latter part of the month, due to that backdoor cold front and the dip in the jet stream. That's way out there, so we'll have to see. Now, the most important parameter right now is that precipitation forecast. You know, of all the weather variables, quantitative precipitation, the amount of precipitation forecasts are always the most difficult, and especially in summertime. But the next 7 days, again, does not look all that favorable for the Eastern Corn Belt. I think it's going to be similar to last week. I think it's not going to be necessarily this widespread everybody, but it's going to be pockets of very heavy rain. It's going to cover a good percentage of the Eastern Corn Belt. There'll be some breaks. And now just as much concern is the lack of sunshine, which is going to sort of keep temperatures down. It's not going to let us pull as much moisture out. Crop condition is not all that good, so the health of the crops is going to reduce evapotranspiration. This isn't what I wanted to see. I wanted to see very dry weather here. I wanted to see hotter than normal temperatures, or at least normal temperatures. So not necessarily the worst case scenario, but certainly not what we'd like to see. Hot and relatively dry over the Western Corn Belt, and especially not that we're in the Corn Belt here, but I think Oklahoma and parts of Kansas, very hot and dry week. Okay, now let's look a little bit further. This is this week. Green are areas that are expected to get above normal precipitation. And one of the things I guess I wanted to point out is a couple weeks ago when we were getting the widespread rains, we had a dark green over this whole area. So again, I think my message, I don't want to be optimistic too much, but at least I don't think the extreme widespread rains producing the huge flooding issues, that's not really what I see. I do see heavy soaking rains, perhaps a little bit more scattered. Okay, now here's this trend again, and I'm very suspicious of this, but let me tell you something I'm worried about. I don't like this temperature gradient that we're getting. When we get this gradient of cooler temperatures, remember I said towards the middle of the week or the month, and then hot temperatures, when we continue to get those temperature gradients, that means we're vulnerable to getting precipitation. In any regard, the models have been trying to shift this out to the west. If we can shift this precipitation out to the west, this would be very favorable for growing conditions over the central part of the Corn Belt. It'd also be positive for the east, although it might be getting too late. No sign of below normal, widespread below normal in the east, but it's possible it could push off to the west. I say possible because I'm a little skeptical of this right now. Week 3, again, this is what I called for in spring, this ample precipitation pattern. If we get this, again, I want dry over the east. This is a little bit above normal, and that's that pattern. I think in Illinois, Indiana, better than it has been, but probably not good enough. That's maybe the best way I can put it. Over the central and west, not too bad. This is actually looks pretty good pattern for Minnesota, Iowa, Dakotas, and Kansas. And then week 4, again, this is amazing how, right here in the middle of getting into August now, how overall these models are showing it to be pretty wet. Now, if you're in some reason, if you're listening to this in the southeast U.S., I think we're going to be looking at a continuation of very dry weather. You can see that precipitation anomaly dry in that region. But look at how widespread this is. Now, this is a climate model 4 weeks out. Take it with a really big grain of salt here. But I think the pattern that we're looking at here for your takeaway points, very hot week, central and western Corn Belt. Over the east, clouds and rain will keep temperatures down. Not as bad as we've seen, but still not good enough. Ample precipitation until further notice, and let's hope it at least shifts a little bit into the west where we need the rain, and we can stop that over the east. Unfortunately, I don't see any signs right now of a prolonged, really significant dry spell over the east. Best it looks like we can do is near normal precipitation heading well into July. So that's been my briefing for today. Hope you find the weather that you need. It's been a challenge this summer so far. Love to hear from you. There's my email. I've heard it from some of you over the last couple weeks. And, let me know if you like what I'm presenting here. Let me know, because if this is helping you, I want to make sure I'm presenting the information. If I'm missing something here that you would like to know, I don't mind at all finding that information for you and hitting that a little bit harder. So let me know if you do like this, and if you don't, if you want something else, let me know as well. Have a good week. Take care. We'll see you later.